Also,
I am a French Canadian and I review TV shows and I play video games on this channel. However, this is one of the most important election here in Canada, so therefore we will be covering a lot of Canadian politics this week and probably in other weeks. So I hope you will tune in to have my perspective on everything.
A sack of potatoes, one bag of potatoes.
So I wanted to use that very short clip to showcase one of the leaders that is so disconnected from reality that he compared potatoes to apple. Actually, he thought apples were actually potatoes. How are you, D Lord?
pretty good. Just waiting on downloading. I don't know if I'll start Expedition 33 at the right time, or I mean, it
Amazing.
releases. It releases in like. It's actually weird. They didn't do a midnight release, but supposedly it's supposed to be released at 2 a.m. But I don't know. I probably wouldn't start it that early. But you know how that works. I'm not the slave to the algorithm versus the.
You talk to a guy that streams when there is no viewer. let's just do
No,
it.
I do have views. You are very much. No, I'm not a slave to. Okay,
No, I was saying I understand you. That's what I was saying.
like there's a thing of first. Okay, first in is better for the algorithm than reacting or doing it later. So if you're first into the algorithm, it promotes you. So
Yeah.
the question, that's why you see a lot of people in gaming. They're like, I'm going to start it as soon as it releases, or I'm going to start before. Yeah, you
Yeah.
fucking ruined that run.
Well, that was a very long intro. Today we talk about Mark Carney, Canadian Liberal Utopia for 2040. So I will bring the video here. So I was very lazy. I didn't really search that much where the source is from, but I kind of trust that person because anyway, there was a debate where you could tell Pierre Poilievre is like, oh, it's really happening, it's disgusting, and it's the liberal platform, in it's disgusting again.
I mean, the
Uh,
biggest problem you find with your politics, as I said, he's just your standard. He's kind of like a standard. Like, he's the placeholder for, like, Trudeau's section of the party. You have Singh, which is ankle biting, and then you got the French guy who's the Quebecer leader, who's playing spoiler like Bernie Sanders is to all of the liberal side because he basically is sabotaging. Now, I would say if the conservative leader is correct, the correct stage would be to let them fight.
yeah,
Because if you, the philosophy there is let them fight, your enemies take themselves down, which is a weird way of. It's a weird way of in art of war and very old. If your enemy is destroying themselves, don't interfere. Just clean it up afterwards, basically.
feeling you.
That's
So
exactly what, to be honest, it's exactly what Trump and them settled on to do. And but lead it to like liberals to tear apart themselves. They do it very.
Shocking
yeah.
interview yesterday. He's shocked this isn't on the front page of every major news outlet. Of course, this
Um, it's not there because they are scared to give bad press to the liberals. This is what's going on, and even if they have the worst plan ever, the liberals are the one that pay the media. That's why it's not really shown. It's kind of hidden. They try to have that plan there. hid from everyone the same way they try to hide Mark Carney when there are journalists around.
No,
Trying to taste blood.
you have more of the media presence and control than the U.S. has.
A lot more. They are so afraid of Independent One. They trash it. They hate it. They even speak about removing any credential of Independent One. They want to suppress any
Well,
independent.
no, that's because you got the hate speech laws thing going on. Like they can basically, it's not as bad as the UK. Australia is getting some.
It will be. Trust me. If we get a fourth
Okay, you
liberal
aren't
term, it will
exactly
be.
UK levels where if you speak to like the wrong thing, they just throw you in prison. Yeah.
We will get that if we get a fourth liberal term. I know that. I just see that coming, and I will
Yeah.
tell people I told you so 4 years ago.
Report, considering that Mark Carney is privy to these things, is not just alarming, but it really shows how much the liberal arm and the liberal extension of the government, including their paid bias media, are willing to bury anything that comes out against the Liberal Party or
Because they want the Liberal Party to win. Because Pierre Poilievre, he knows independent one matter more. He knows that the only honest journalists out there are independent ones. Because every government supported outlet out there is just there to promote what's the government about. And furthermore, most of them are leftists anyway. So can we really trust them? No, they will lie. They will shit on the right. This is what they do. Terrible.
It depends on the system because usually, okay, are they editorialist? Were they desk reporters? You have to ask if they were desk reporters or editorial journalists, they're clearly going to have a strong bias. The problem with the media, even after a while, like most of the news media, at least in the US, they get the same morning news brief every morning, right?
Yeah.
It's no different. They all get the same one. That's why a majority, if you can put it up to a lot of the news people, you can put it side by side on your average news. Now, the thing that makes it subtly different, right, is how they do it and what they cover. Because remember, I said on this one prior to this one you did, do they? Because you have the Canadian Broadcasting Network that is probably largely theirs, right? That's
Yeah.
paid for, like, it's like PBS or BBC. BBC is very similar. It is the government funded version.
Yeah.
So you have this thing of, but there's also this where I have followed people who are Canadian, like Mark Stein, which I'm probably sure you've never heard of because he used to be on radio up there. He had his shit suppressed, right? He basically, it's like when Jordan Peterson started becoming an issue, they started sending hate speech stuff after him. And this is weird, like how they do it, not to just as much to control the narrative, as much as it is to influence. Because this is exactly how China maintains control. China maintains control the same way. You need to, well, if you control the narrative, you win. And
Yeah.
that's the issue. It's not that they don't cover it as much as it's the do they have the integrity to cover it too?
They don't.
And a lot of the people who are actually trying to come up, and they don't have to be like the Tim Pools or the radio, Some of them are, because not everyone just 100%. Now, you always have what are the bootlickers. They'll easily submit. And that's the thing. In the US, we have that in the terms of CNN and MSNBC. Like a
And
lot.
to give you an idea, during the French debate, uh, actually no, that was during the debate we covered. The people on set, they were like, kick the independent media out. We don't want their voice to be heard, or some crap like
They
that.
won't be favored, and the problem I saw there too is that moderator was trying to run interference. That's
Not
something.
really. The worst than that, it was like I'm forced by the law to let them in, and there's nothing I can do to stop them from being there. So as much as you hate them, these independent ones, they have the right to be here. So I cannot kick them out. And that was kind of hilarious and sad at the same time to see
Well, no,
big network like that
you
here.
have the moderator who's in charge of the debate.
Yeah.
That we'll call it a debate or discussion. His whole thing is to. It's kind of like when Trump was doing his debates. The journalist would come in and have to say Kamala or somebody. Like, they are a biased source sometimes. And you have to understand, media, this is why you read between the lines with a lot of media sources. That's what I do. That's how I get my news. I take one, I'll go look at like sometimes Fox News. I have my main ones I go to, which are pretty unbiased. But as far as your national news people are largely biased in a section or another. And
Yeah.
you have to look at certain sources. And that's the biggest issue with something like your press. Remember something, as I told you, news is dropped largely Mondays, Wednesdays, and if they want something buried, they drop it Friday. Because if they drop the article Friday, very few people see it because it gets buried by the weekend.
Yeah.
Monday is the breaking news. Wednesday is the midweek hump kind of thing where they'll have it. But most news sites are all this way. So in government stuff, always look for the news at the end of the week. If it's dumped on a Friday, it's more important.
Or shows the future
For sure.
that Canada is under. We're going to talk about under a liberal government. Sorry, we're going to talk about this today because it's very alarming. It's a very dystopian look at what Canada is going to turn into. What this report claims Canada is going to turn into under the.
And furthermore, like, trust me, Mark Carney will be pro end of freedom of speech. He will be the first one that destroys it. That's how liberal operates, to keep control. They destroy what kind of worked for a long time because that's against what they want.
Current regime of leadership. We've already talked about Mark Carney's astronomical budget, how he wants to add over $200 billion to our deficit.
And for those who didn't understand well, this is more tax. This is more fees the tax buyer will freaking pay for. And we got Run. I like that comment. You will eat bugs and be happy. Hell yeah, you won't own anything and you will be happy. That's the liberal idea here in Canada.
No, you're talking about when I say too, Canada has a large amount of influence by World Economic Forum people. Those are the people who bail out second and third world countries to buy either influence. but they have also largely been in the U.S. Tried to get into the U.S., but they were able to get into Canada more because that is the only other initiative that blocks the Belt and Road, which is the Chinese major initiative to gain foothold and financial influence. So I'm hoping that this isn't like a document, like if you look at a budget, because what would damn Carney is if there's anything like Project 2025 or a press junket of what he wants to do. Because if he put out what he wants to pass or do as PM, you can pick that apart. That's the thing he had if he did do that.
Yeah.
That's why Kamala Harris didn't have a lot of negative press for a while. You couldn't nail her down on anything. You could nail her down on stuff she said at her rallies, but you couldn't nail her down at a level because she didn't have a platform to run on. But also, that's what hurt her negatively in the long run, because she got found out for what she does. She was going to be the third Biden term, basically, or the fourth term for Obama, depending on how you looked at it.
Yeah.
And that's the tip of the iceberg. I really don't understand after seeing this how anyone can vote for Mark Carney. I'm not telling anybody how to vote. I just don't understand it. I don't understand how anybody thinks this is a redeeming quality. I'll share a little bit about that. Actually, once we get into the article, I want to request before we get into it. If you're enjoying this video, please hit a thumbs up, a comment. Please hit that subscribe button. I've already had multiple videos removed from this channel throughout the election. In fact, yesterday, YouTube censored a ton of content that was citing articles.
I am not surprised. It's the government trying to damage control as much as they can. And we got another comment. The saddening requirement is that they must tell you what they will do to you before they proceed. Yeah, and people are gullible, so they will buy into it. It's hilarious. Anyway, let's see what happens next.
Against Mark Carney. If you haven't yet hit the subscribe button, it's only going to get worse leading up to next week's election. And should Mark Carney get in, could be the end of this channel. Hit that subscribe button, turn on your bell for all
Not
notifications.
only this channel, but I feel like a lot of these independent media will all suffer from that. And I wouldn't be surprised if he passed some kind of law where you cannot be an independent media just because you cannot control them. And liberal are all about control and placing themselves into someone else's shoes, and they cannot let freedom be. They pretend they do, but they don't.
So that you don't miss a beat when something is dropped on this channel, at least for the short amount of time it may be on this channel. Follow every Canadian political content creator that you follow on this platform. I know people get sick of me saying it, but it's now more important than ever with censorship the way it's going. Let's get into this article from the Toronto Sun, because they're at least covering this. And again, they typically make things line up in the middle of the page, so I'm sorry that it seems like it's far over on the screen.
I really wished I was able to find that. I'm sure if I was better with searching, I would, because it doesn't seem that hard to find. But I mean, I've seen a clip of Pierre Poilievre answering the question, "Have you seen that around?" And it was like, "Yeah, I did." And he was really sad and depressed because that guy has two kids. Pierre Poilievre has two kids. One autistic kid and a young child as well. So yeah, let's see what happens with that liberal plan. The Utopia, the title kind of mentioned.
But you'll be able to see the whole article. I'll read it out. It says here that a government report predicts a 2040 dystopia collapsed economy, and people hunting for food. This is a government article. This isn't just somebody's. This isn't an economist. This isn't somebody who looks at stocks and bonds who predicts a economic collapse. If you've ever seen movies like The Big Short, this is the government knowing what's coming, yet they're.
And they want that because more control. If people cannot buy anything, more control. Any thoughts on that, D-Lord? D-Lord, are you still with us, or you just ate a bullet or something? Canada is finished. Yeah, it's cooked. If it's freaking liberals in charge, it's cooked. So I guess D-Lord is not around anymore, sadly. So let's play the rest.
Moving us straight into it for profits.
The
Says here
global
it's a dystopian
reset.
future where the wealth and property ownership is entirely generational. Post-secondary education is no longer a key to success, and hungry Canadians resort to poaching wildlife to feed their families. Sounds great, doesn't it?
It doesn't.
While this is
But
quickly
that
becoming a
was fun.
reality for more and more Canadians, an internal government report from Policy Horizons Canada warns these horrors could become everyday life in Canada as early as 2040, so in 15 years.
My kids will freaking know this crap. I don't have kids yet, but like that's on the plans for eventually soon if it works out well with my girlfriend. Are you back with us, D-Lord? Just have a sign of life if you're still with us. Oh, you're there. I heard you. So any thoughts on that? Have you heard any of this?
Just go back. Sorry, what was the other? What's the claim, I should say?
We will hunt for our food apparently in 15 years in Canada.
So,
I'll actually rewind because you must
so
hear
the
it.
World Economic Forum, right?
I will rewind so you hear it
Yeah,
yourself.
let me see what he says.
For food.
Wait,
This is a government article.
Wait.
They
There.
typically make things line up in the middle of the page, so I'm sorry that it seems like it's far over on the screen, but you'll be able to see the whole article. I'll read it out. It says here that a government report predicts a 2040 dystopia, collapsed economy, and people hunting for food. This is a government article. This isn't just somebody's. This isn't an economist. This isn't somebody who looks at stocks and bonds who predicts a economic collapse. If you've ever seen movies like The Big Short, this is the government knowing what's coming, yet they're moving us straight into it.
No,
For
Agenda.
profits.
Hold on a second. So you can move back forward. Agenda 2030 is really similar because that is supposed to be the World Economic Forum's. Like the joke about the global reset is about 2030, but humans, as we say, would there be a section of collapse by 2040-ish? Because largely when you're predicting a future like this, depending on the conditions, you either have borderline dystopias around the world, or you have refugee crises that lead into other issues that have social collapse in parts. We are more towards the mix of the social economic collapses with the government's imploding section with retaining power on top of it. So the idea you're hunting food, I wouldn't say that because like
that will be like this. This is what they predict. This is what the government predicts, bro.
Okay, this is the Canadian so you're like talking about social unrest, right? Because this is assuming you have all anarchy and everything break loose.
Well, we won't be able to afford food, so we won't have a chance.
Okay, no, the thing about with the whole war in Ukraine is a breadbasket for a large section of the world. People don't realize that when you look at how much they produce for Europe and parts. Like in the US, you have the breadbasket in the middle. California, farmers are paid not to farm. That's at least. So it's not about the food thing as much as maybe quality and the economic mobility. Now, if you were talking about economic mobility, that's just, sometimes the market looks at does a wage influence for the better or worse. Because, and that's a big deal about it, because a government report, right? So, depending on the philosophy or policy, you need more than 4 years to change stuff. Yeah, like Trump can be president for 4 years, pass stuff, but not all of his stuff gets done in 4 years. Sometimes that takes 8. That's why usually presidents or that you have back to back. That's meaning you can implement things. Now, a 4th term of liberal people for you would be very scaringly similar, like the period between 10 to about 2020 for us, for you guys, as it was for us. But if it weren't for the Tea Party people kicking and damaging a lot of the progressivism, and then progressivism burning out, yeah. The thing about this is, it's not like people can't hunt or do food, but it takes, to correct an economy, it takes 4 to 6 years. Solid.
We are cooked. We already passed that point.
So, but you can ease economic measures to a degree, but it's kind of like if you look at the U.S. right now, as far as economics depressions go, the only thing that with the tariffs, Trump is cooked entirely if there is a recession. Now, it is up to our Congress and other world leaders to be adults, pass a budget or pass a continuing resolution every 3 to 6 months. All right? That is what they've been doing for 10 plus years at this rate. The continuing resolutions. Canada, I do not know. Because you guys still have the hunting, like that type stuff. But the idea that there would be economic collapse in this century is not unprecedented by 2040 or 2050.
Well, you're not in Canada, bro.
Now, technically, well, you think Canada's that much different than the U.S.?
Because we are more broke than you guys. You guys still have so much money. And us, we are like broke and we still like...
The only thing in the U.S.
I swear, if we compare our money to yours, I could bet these liberals almost spent as they were you guys.
They try to see this works. It would work for them if. See, the only reason U.S. is good at servicing its debt is because our GDP is still good. If our GDP dips and the debt call-ins come in, we've already at one point under Biden, we were downgraded under Moody's. Now, it doesn't mean that the Chinese are doing better either, because their empire is largely built on realtor property or investment property. They were able, see, foreign investors like them were able to turn a lot of those into shelters and things for migrants. A lot of people did that in New York City. The thing about the buildings, but a majority of China's economic success is largely built on realty investments on loans. And if those loans default, their economy implodes worse than our housing recession that led to the 2008 crash. In the U.S., we are good at servicing our debt, but our debt to GDP ratio is starting to increase. So servicing the debt is getting harder for us. That's why like 4 more years of Kamala Harris would have easily cooked that. But our debt, but we're only good as a nation if we can service our debt. Canada, I don't know how you guys could be in the same. So
We are doing so badly that there are talks about us getting kicked out of the J7. And it's
look, it's not
serious.
even the G8 anymore. It used to be the G8. Then the Russians got kicked out,
We
and
will
then
get
it's
kicked
gonna.
out because we're too broke, because we got liberal for 10 years.
Canada. Well, G8 is supposed to be economic, but but a lot of economies are so-called built on sand now.
Yeah.
Like,
Let's play
yes.
the rest, because now we kind of expanded a lot on that.
It says here it's a dystopian future where the wealth and property ownership is entirely generational. Post-secondary education is no longer a key to success, and hungry Canadians resort to poaching wildlife to feed their families. Sounds great, doesn't it?
That sounds like a normal
While this is quickly
progression.
becoming a reality for more and more Canadians,
enforced
an
society.
internal government report from Policy Horizons Canada warns these horrors could become everyday life in Canada as early as 2040, so in 15 years. Returning society to one based on intergenerational wealth.
That will go back to the age of kings and queens. This is progress, folks. Let's revert back to like 300 years ago, because like we didn't progress enough. We need to go back in time.
Okay, you have twofold here. There is the belief that all democracies revert back to monarchies in the first place. That's why monarchism is very similar in terms of democracies. There is also where most democracies also can turn into quote unquote dictatorships with a strong man at the top. Because, Mike, if you look at the US, okay, liberals are very fond of saying there's always going to be an oligarchy and a baron class. What if I told you late 1800s to the early 1900s, you still had what were barons? At one point, J.P. Morgan Chase had enough money alone, plus other wealth, to be very sustainable to pay off the entire U.S. to service and pay off the entire debt of the United States. The people who built Pittsburgh, the steel industry, Carnegie, those were barons. The newer barons have different generational wealth, right? Now,
Yeah.
the idea we would have an oligarchy, that's just kind of. See, there's this moment where we are close to societal collapse, but it's also we're going into what is called the fourth turning. So no one knows really what's going to happen. Basically. So the idea, so when he starts talking about social mobility is determined by a people's ability to progress themselves. You guys will start noticing an issue when you start losing your middle class. The US, a lot of
Dying, dude. I said it in lots of streams. My mother is doing
Yeah.
twice the minimum wage. So
minimum wage is
I-
month to month.
twice. I'm saying twice. So 2 times. So I'd say she is probably maybe in the lower end of the middle class. There's no way she is in the lower class with her money she is making in a year. And she is struggling with 2 kids that are underage.
So the middle class,
crazy.
a shrinking middle class is very much the signs of an economic collapse is coming to that country.
My mother was voting liberals for years. Last time she voted something else than liberals was, I believe, 2011, 2012. That was Jack Layton last time he ran. But outside of that, she's been voting uh, liberals for 25 plus years. And this election, she went conservative because she realized it's kind of rigged if you keep voting the statu quo that the liberals are offering.
So the thing in the U.S., like my grandfather, because I was largely raised by my grandparents, diehard in the wool Democrat, but he died the year Obama was elected, and he would have never voted for a black man just because not as much as racism as much as he didn't believe what he said. Like the idea that there's a large section of voters who just vote for what they think is a status quo, like, and that's largely what's probably hit Canada over time. They learn to vote one way. It's kind of in it hits Republicans too, because like I live in Texas and Ted Cruz is our senator. We've been stuck with him because the opposition sucks. Every time they try to primary him, sometimes if they don't primary him at all, we're stuck with the same candidate the next time around. And it's either vote for him or go vote for a Democrat to get him out of power. And you're like, we are stuck.
Yeah, and now before we play, there's another thing I will say. Even my grandma, she has been a liberal for most of her life, and just like my mother, like the last time she voted something else than liberal, that was like 2011 or 2012, I can't remember. The last term we had Jack Layton, she voted NPD. But outside of that, my grandma voted liberal almost her entire life, and now she is quite old because that's my grandma, and she voted conservative this time around. So that's telling when someone that has been liberal their entire life choose to not be liberal anymore. That's telling. She's like, I cannot trust the guy, and of course you can't because he hides his money in the USA. And now
You're as good as when you have when the mainline parties start losing their normie supporters, like the Democrats, you could tell, and they still haven't understood this in the US, they lost their white middle class or working class voters.
yeah,
So you started going through the platform in 20 and then around others where you started saying the demographic shift was to go towards minorities and gay people and niche issues. That was bad focus grouping. That wound up costing them like multiple elections. And if they in the midterms in the US haven't learned, they're going to get their clocks cleaned. And
yeah,
in Canada, that what you're seeing is the bases wake up when they get it's similar. The enemy of the liberal or the Democrats became the white man. And the ones who still vote Democrat or liberal in the United States largely are the ones who are what I call the cuck white people, or the ones with such white guilt they feel the need to repent.
yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You might have those up there. You need to pay for
It's
the
not
state.
as bad here. I think here it's not as bad on that aspect, but you might have a fair point. Now, again, I will repeat one last time what I believe is going to happen. They want to turn the clock. They want us to go back 300 years ago because they know a small portion of population was really in charge back then, and they missed that. This the elite. This is Mark Carney for you. Mask off, and now I guess we can play more of this Utopia, the dream life of a liberal leader.
with land barons and aristocracy uh, usually found only in history books. Entitled Future Lives Social Mobility in Question, the report paints a picture of what life in Canada could soon be like if current economic policy stays the course. Quote from the article, or the report: social mobility lies at the heart of the Canadian project. Many people in Canada assume that following the rules and doing the right things will lead to a better life, said the report's introduction.
I'd say a lot of people still believe this crap, and it's not really effective anymore. But hey, let's just keep going.
However, things are changing. Wealth inequality is rising. It is already common.
It's already quite high, let's be honest there. If someone that has 2 times the minimum wage struggles, it's telling, it's already up there. And my mother will never own anything. If no miracle happens to her, she will never own anything. And that's a reality of many people out there. Society wants you down, not up.
For children to be less upwardly mobile than their parents. So what they're painting here is the old saying. Now, my father sold his first home that he owned in the 80s for $1 because interest rates went through the roof. Anybody who grew up in that time or was around during that time knows what I'm talking about. My old man always told me that if you work for a company, you work hard, you work your way up the ladder, they'll promote from within, they'll educate from within, and you'll find you have a good life.
I was raised that way, but the moment I really grew up and realized how reality is, it's already fading away. It's already no longer like that. They tell you these sweet words, but liberals actually destroyed everything. Any thoughts on that, D-Lord?
So what you're seeing is the idea is okay. It comes from the idea, as much as, and I've said this, we know that the upward, I would say largely, quote unquote, the American dream is what we used to call it. And that is what we used to call that, basically.
And the
Well,
Canadian dream was really close to yours.
like the idea, right, is you own a house, you can raise a family, you can have that. Like at one time, Democrats embraced unions, okay? They don't do that anymore, strangely enough. You could get a junior job, you could work one job your entire life. Oh, good luck on that one.
Yeah, good luck on that one. Well said.
You will
Putting out
stay.
quality.
Sorry. That's a big deal. That's a big difference from one generation to another.
Yeah.
They don't, you're not staying at one job.
And basically, I will summarize well in a quite simple way. No more earning and improving one's life. So basically, you won't be able to change your class in society because it's set from the start, and the elite like it because their kids will be elite as well, because that's the only way wealth will be passed down to.
But intergenerational wealth is only as good as what they pass down. And that's the problem, because it's also the issue, like, just because it's kind of like in the old days of kings and queens. Children are only as good as what they learn. If the children are retarded, good luck to you, because your leadership is only as good as what happens.
Yeah. And this is why the current election are so important in Canada. We don't want this crap. I don't know anybody that wants that. If you got kids, if you want kids, you want them to have a similar life to you or a better life. And I don't think it can be a better life. Like, I swear, people down in the street, the homeless, they have a better life than that, because at least they can improve and change their life. When you're stuck in that circle there in the society, the utopia they promote, you cannot improve, you cannot earn, you cannot increase, you cannot change. You're stuck there. And that's depressing. That's really bad. And later on, that article will mention these things as a good thing, because these are liberals we are talking about. These are leftists we are talking about. They are so disconnected from reality. They just tell BS and they don't realize it.
you'll be rewarded and see great success in your life if you're willing to do the work. What this report is stating is that no.
Okay, so we got a very interesting question. Can someone explain why the government would put out a report right before the election that looks so bad for the future of a liberal Canada? Well, I got several guesses. Number one, that's someone that's a plant. That's someone that wanted for the liberal to fail. Two, maybe it's a lie, but I would be very surprised because this is the liberal agenda. This is why they don't care about inflation. They don't want you to process anything. They want you to be in debt to pay back and to give back your cars, your house, or whatever you got. So that's why I don't think it's a lie. Number three, there are some people that are like, you know what? It's crazy. It's ridiculous. We need to spread the word, and people need to know the truth. And I think this is what's going on. I think the third one is the most likely in the tree. I don't think it's a plant because if it's a plant, who planted it? I don't know. I
So
don't think I don't think it's a lie, and I strongly believe in the later that we got some people in that party that were like, you know what? Let's just release that.
so there's this. So something happened in 2020. Hillary Clinton was deemed a darling by the Democrats. And you can go back and find this. She had 150 FBI agents up her ass on the Clinton Foundation. You just don't have 150 FBI agents looking into your shit for no reason. Now, this was coming on the heels of the email scandal by the whole throw her in jail kind of thing.
Yeah, but sorry, I will interrupt you.
No, but I want to. No,
I got another idea that just
yes.
came up. The other idea is some people inside think it's actually a good idea, but they don't really think because they're just scholars, and sometimes scholars are goddamn stupid because they just want things to change, even if it's bad. At least it's change. So I think that's a fourth case where there are some people that are like, it looks fun, let's do it, but they don't realize how stupid this is and how nonsensical it is. And I wouldn't be surprised if they find a way to remove that so there's no proof, or they realize there's backlash to that so they don't like it. That's a fourth guess that just came
So
out.
you have this thing. They couldn't remove Hillary as a candidate because she was the chosen one and it would have looked weird to primary her. So the FBI, the theory was the FBI did their October surprise, and this was under Comey, and they released it, which hurt Hillary's chances to actually win the presidency. Now, you also have another case in which you needed to get Joe Biden out of the presidential race. So liberals initially slit his own throat to get rid of him. Now, this is the thing. This wouldn't be the first time. Like, call it active revenge. Call it a person who's disillusioned. They want to see the current party regime fall so you could rebuild from the ashes. That's likely what they're after. Because Democrats, you think, would be doing that in the U.S. by burning down their own. Because as of today, Dick Durbin, a couple of hours ago, is no longer running. And Dick Durbin leading the leadership is a big deal because it's been vital in the Democrat machine in the U.S. So I would not see, and also look for, you'll notice either it's an act of random journalism or somebody's on their way out is just leaking stuff to sabotage the party.
Yeah, that's the seed. That's the number one. But again, the latter sound fun as well. A scholar may be the reason behind that, because the scholar was like, "That looks fun because I'm left leaning and the crazy, like beyond rational and intelligence, and I think it's a good idea." And they are like, "Let's spread the love of the word," because later on I remember seeing they tried to promote it as a good thing. So I don't know. People are just weird. Um,
The thing is,
they
you.
try
The
to
thing is,
brainwash you.
the thing is, you also need for society and a societal collapse. Like I've joked about Australia being like close to Mad Max levels for years. The fun fact is they aren't that far off. You think most societies in this era, like you can look at the US and look at the quote unquote summer of love. How quickly did the US cities during the Black Lives Matter rallies descend into violence? Not that hard in the case of economic collapse, or you start to see it. It happens in Central and South America a lot. But now we haven't seen it in areas like the US as much because usually rational heads prevail. But this is why I say there's that theory that I guarantee someone may have leaked this report who was dissatisfied in the liberals as a warning sign.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
and
a.
maybe I got the fifth one there. They put out this, and they all, like, people won't believe it, and they will say it's misinformation, or they will say, "Oh, it's not true," or "It's a lie, it cannot be possible," or "It's a way to try to sabotage the liberals," so they will like dismiss it because they will put it forefront, and people won't believe that absurdity, that
Well,
nonsensical plan.
to be fair, look, put the theory was a long time ago. Put the conspiracy theory out first. It is also a good way to test the water to see how good indoctrination is, because I've heard most of my life about the people who the Earth was. Al Gore told me in 2000 that the Earth was supposed to be underwater in sections.
Yeah, so I think we answered that question pretty well. Thank you very much, Fady Fate. Amazing question. If you got other question, I'm all in. I like it. So we will just play the rest, and I enjoy having chat interaction there. It's fun. I don't usually get that in my movie reviews streams, so I guess I will get political more often. I don't know. It's a off topic. Let's just play.
The elite, such as the globalists in our government, who behave entitled, are going to have exponential wealth, and the plebs of the world are going to be told, well, since you're less mobile than the last generations, because of the actions of said government, you're going to go without. It's going to go back to the rich people and the peasants.
400 years ago.
It says here
That
that
goes back
upward
to what I
social
said.
mobility will be unheard of in 2040 as hopes of building a better life disappear, the report predicted. In 2040, upward social mobility is almost unheard of in Canada. Hardly anyone believes that they can build a better life for themselves.
I feel like that mindset has already started. The mindset is already there. It will just get worse when they really adopt that. The mindset of just giving up. Do you feel like there's that in the US? Just the mindset of giving up?
See, the thing about US is we try to offset the uh, the goal is you autocorrect parties that are acting bad. This is why like every 8 years we have a shift, because this is largely why in American history or American politics you don't ever see a supermajority unless someone's really fucked up. Because that is because, for the most part, let's assume a Republican controls a presidency the House and the Senate are usually Democrat controlled. And it's vice versa because we try to have an internal balance. Every so often, we get a supermajority where people can push through stuff. Like Obama had it for a period because there was such a backlash against Republicans, right up until around the Tea Party had it. Because there's always a way to autocorrect. If Americans aren't above a revolution, so to speak, but they won't turn the guns on their own. I mean, January 6th is a prime example. It was a walk through the Capitol, and literally even Democrats felt the election was stolen. So the concept is we still have enough good people and enough ability between the 2-year election cycle and the way our government works. Nothing goes too far. The problem is if a lot of policies stay into place. See, right now, economic mobility is still good in the U.S. Canada, I'm not sure because you guys.
Canada is getting worse every year.
Well,
It's
no,
still
you've had
possible,
more. You've
but
had
it's
more than
getting
10
worse.
years. You've had more than 10 years of this style of leadership.
Yeah. Well,
Because
before that wasn't that bad. It really started like 2015.
you need okay. The thing is, for what you see in Canada and to have a societal collapse, you need a generational influence, and it depends on how far gone your Zoomers are. If there's an awakening in your Zoomer generation, similar to the US, you might have hope.
I
Because
spoke to my cousins. They are younger than me, so therefore they are Zoomers.
are they Gen Alpha or are they millennial?
No, they are like the youngest among Zoomers. And I was talking to them, and at some point I just gave up because I thought they were like really brainwashed on a lot of things, and I was like, you know what, they are too there, and I don't want to fight because it's a family meeting, and I just
You
want
don't
to
want
enjoy
to
my
fight.
time.
I understand. There's
And
also there's a
I was sad. I was like, this is brainwash crap. It's sad. It
they're
affected
socially
school.
conditioned young. The thing is, a lot of people. So with the 60s, the radicals from the 60s and the 70s in the US mastered the ability so much so that the Soviets were impressed that you start getting into the education systems. Every generation following becomes more radical than the one before. Basically, they were very impressed by the US. Even Hitler himself said the US would fall from within. That because you can't take the US down, because if you attack the United States as a prime example, they always unite around nationalism. But the whole thing in indoctrination, it depends on how far that goes. Because in what I see in Zoomers coming through high school now, some of them are very intelligent, some are very stupid. Because you have the millennials are a mixed bag, but it's the ones replacing the ruling class that are going to determine. I'm not saying societal collapse is preventable, but like what you're talking about is you have a lot of people who aren't even good at hunter gathering. So you're talking in a case of societal collapse, majority would die of starvation or whatever else just because they don't know how to hunt or so. Let's assume hypothetically, that type stuff. But the whole thing too is a system. It's kind of weird because when you start thinking 10 years off, because if you say what would happen in 10 years, you can only go off theoretical. Like there's a large majority of prediction within the next 4 years you could have a global war. But that's beyond the realm of. That's why a lot of the military people say that it's not going to be the early 20s, it's going to be the late 20s.
Yeah.
or their children through their own efforts. The reports. So why are we promoting this then? Why is Mark Carney moving ahead? That should be dead. Oh, you're telling me Canadians aren't going to be able to do anything? They're going to be convinced that they can't get ahead. Oh yeah, Canada first. Team or not Canada first, but Team Canada, elbows up, right?
I think Carney wants that because he knows he is rich and he will probably retire at that point, get his good pension, and he won't suffer the consequence of that kind of BS. Or maybe he will even die before that. I don't know. I don't know how old he is. If he is in his 60s, maybe he will be very old, but he doesn't care. Politicians are living the moment. They're having a field trip. They're having a party on the taxpayers.
In the case of the US,
Love it.
though, you have a ruling class like Mitch McConnell who finally stepped down or died in office because a lot of our politicians eventually start to die in office. A large majority of Democrats might be lawyers or something for a couple of years and then they get in to be politicians. They'll go from the House to the Senate. Like John McCain was already like serving. You get used to here in the US, a large majority of a senator, that becomes your senator because that senator's been up there for 10 years or 12 years, right? Because you have like 4 terms in Senate limit. There's like a limit to it to a degree.
We should have more limits here, but we don't because we are stupid.
But see, you don't think of so economic stuff lasts 6 to 8 years because people forget you have to reset economics. Basically,
Yeah.
that's how it happens because home ownership, largely home ownership, has been decreasing. But what's funny is Zoomers and parts of millennials would rather rent than own a home.
Actually, they don't have the money. That's why they rent. They don't have the money. It's the case with my mom. She doesn't have the money, therefore she cannot buy. And like the other day, she was like, "It's possible I may end up winning a 1 million prize." And if she does win that prize, the first thing she will buy is an house, or I should say, a block with 2 houses in it. Because with 1 million, you can do a lot, but not that many people have that million just there sitting when you are getting inflation and all of the daily expenses or all of the money that you should spend for roof, for food. If you got a car, for car. If you don't, well, public transport costs money as well. So it's a lot of money that just goes down the drain. So yeah, I think, to go back to Carney, why would he want that? Well, we know the guy hides money. We know why. He knows that we will have dark times in the future, and he will just have the best life he will dream of because he has all of that money stashed away. And it's funny because I heard it's possible, and maybe that's misinformation, so take that with a grain of salt, but I heard that Carney actually doesn't live in Canada, or he may have come here for the debates and such, and for rallies, but he doesn't really have an house or a base. He only crash out somewhere temporarily, and the rest of his family are still in Europe, apparently. And it's telling. Maybe he's like, if it doesn't work out, I'll just leave that place. So he doesn't really care about Canada. And I wouldn't be surprised if he get in power. He does this term. he gets suspension, he leaves. That's why he doesn't care, because he's not a true Canadian. He is a European, or he was born here, but he doesn't give a crap about here, and he just uses us as pawn.
Do you not have like standards where you're forced to live in the district? Or
We don't have
stay?
standard. We are stupid. Here in Canada, they
Okay, do your politicians have to live in the districts they run in?
here no,
Residency?
apparently no, or maybe they banned it because it's Carney. Apparently Carney is, there's a lot of sketchy things. Like we said it in the previous stream, only 40% of the Liberals were authorized to actually vote for Carney, and the other 60%, we don't know what happened with them. We didn't ask them, we didn't question them about that. So that was not a true election like the usual election we get when there's someone that leaves. So again, that's sketchy, that's weird. And Carney, the entire time he speaks, he's always lying about everything. So, like, I wouldn't be surprised if he breaks some laws, or if it's on purpose that they are hiding him. I don't know. I don't know, but
Because
like, yeah,
you get what I'm saying.
yeah, yeah. And I feel like even if we had rules like that, I think he thinks he's above that.
I mean,
And
that's why
in
like you see a politician in the US where we know they're trying to run or something, they'll go buy a house or get a residency inside another state. Where it sounds weird, but you're like, why would you have a house here? Like rich people have that so they could go to another area.
he is rich, so I'm sure he has like a bunch of
Like,
pension
does
all
he
over the
really?
globe.
The thing is, if he gets it, he'll largely be like another rubber stamp for the liberal or the branch that still supports Trudeau as a status quo. That will be his place. Now, is there enough of a support for that? Because I'll be honest, depending on it all depends on how many seats, right? Is that so what the election you have coming up, is that for minister or is that for like seats to
It's
gain
for
more?
prime minister and seats at the same time. So basically, what will happen is, um, they will see the percent and the number of seats, and like last year, not last year, in 2021, what happened? We had 200,000 people that voted conservatives that didn't vote liberal. So we had more conservative. However, because the liberal were already in power prior, they had more seats, and because of that, well, despite having like 32% of people voting conservative and like 30% voting for liberal, liberal went in power. So what's going on this time around? They are running to see who can get the most seats, and unfortunately maybe the same shit will happen where we get more people voting conservative, but because they won the last two election at that point, the liberal will still get in power again. And
What is the okay? I'm gonna ask this. What is the early voting looking like for you guys? Do you know?
it depends on where you look at. If you look at all of these sellout media that are discussing because they are paid by the government, liberals are doing well. If you look in the independent scene, depending where you look at, uh, it's very close, but liberal are slightly above. And in other sources, actually, conservative are slightly above. But the slightly above won't be enough because, again, liberal have more seats because it's rigged. Let's be honest, it's rigged. We have a really stupid system with seats. And this is what's going on. And if you look at Quebec polls, it's kind of interesting because there's a bigger gap between liberal and conservatives than other outlets. but people also vote in a very different way, where they will vote a lot of other parties that are not voted elsewhere. So it's very weird.
And the other part is, let's assume polling doesn't add up, because this happened with the Democrats in our elections. People were lying to the exit polls. The polls, and then you'll start to see in the exit, because that is it. You kind of have to determine how far a population is. If there's enough people who, because look at their approval ratings and look who the registrars are going for. That is usually a clear indicator which side is doing actually better. Because if you have a large amount of registration going for one party, or a higher turnout in early primaries, like almost everything was pointing towards Trump having the red wave this time around, but it was still going to come down to like 6 states. But he should have been ahead. Now, ultimately, that's what you have to look for in your elections. Because if it's going to start be at a local level and see where the momentum is. Because if the momentum is still with certain parts, it will just stay that way. If there is no momentum or registrations in one party's favor, it's going to go status quo. I hate saying that. That's just enough in elections that I've seen in various places over the years. Then occasionally you have entire flips in weird areas, like the Trump of South America guy who turned around who started turning around a third world nation. Like, these things happen. In Canada, right? If it's for seats, the Conservatives need to start, because that's where you need to see. Because if you needed the Conservative Prime Minister, right? And it's going to be him, you need to see if there's grounds that people vote for them.
Yeah.
That will be the ground level, right?
Before we close back that small tangent, I gotta say, if you really compare numbers that you can actually see as facts, you compare Pierre Poilievre, which is conservatives, to Mark Carney, which is liberal, you can tell Pierre Poilievre has a far bigger following. And it's intriguing. It's interesting as well. And to add more, we had disruption in plans in conservatives' rally, but we had nothing in liberals. So it's very interesting. They are so afraid of conservatives that they will try to ruin the rallies there. It's weird. It's just weird. Now, to get back on the matter of that segment, why would Carney want that? Well, he doesn't care about Canadian. He is not a Canadian. He will never be. He has money, so that won't even affect him or his kids, because anyway, his wealth will be passed down to his kids. So that's why someone would be pro that idea. A lot of old people, they will die anyway, so they don't care. This is exactly what's going on. This is why we should also change a bit the system, where not only the rich and the old are in power, but no, that's too much asked. Anyway, let's play.
Elbows up, everybody. The report predicted key problems include the irrelevancy of post-secondary education, as only the most wealthy will be able to afford tuition. The students will only enroll only to cement their positions in Canada's elite. I mean, that's already starting. We've seen that in universities. The university structure has crumbled over the last 2 decades. Universities are now overridden with woke ideologies, and they're essentially nothing more than a business to put students in debt, to give them a slip of paper that I hate to break it to anybody who's been to university, unless you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer, Most people who go to university don't end up with a decent job when they come out. In fact, they end up with a job that pays them slightly more than they would have made working without going to university.
I'm making
And part
as
of that is
much
due to
money as someone that has 3 post-secondary school degree. So secondary is like high school. So the guy has 3 years after high school, he has a degree in accountant, and I'm making as much money as him, and I just have high school as official degrees. Now I did study after high school. I did study a lot of different things. Literature, psychology, mostly psychology. I studied a lot of psychology, but I was too bad to really finish degrees, and I still end up making more money than an accountant that studied 3 years more than me and that got a degree 3 more years than me. So, like, in total, I did study more than him in general, but my pay has nothing to do with my level of study.
So
Uh,
I would say the issue you're seeing, and this is the weird part in the mobility section of how stuff works, is you have to look at is think of it as the death of the tradesman. Tradesmen are just as important. Sometimes a plumber and a mechanic and a machinist is as important as an accountant. But
yeah,
was a belief that you needed to go to school, have a career, and that. And then they forget that you still need the plumber, the electrician, the machinist, right?
yeah,
Those people are still as vital. It sounds weird, but you still need the working class people. There are some people who are not built to go to college.
that's true.
And what do you do with those people? Those people, they forget that there's been this thing of liberals think those sections manage themselves and they're never unhappy till they are. Because you can't just have the issue with college debt. But then there's also these people who thought, oh, I could just go to school, be a dimwit for art degrees, and come out with $100,000 a year job. Or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's play the rest.
the influx of people we're bringing over into this country that undercut Canadian citizens and are willing to work for less because 16 of their family members all share the same house. I've seen it in oil and gas. The report also says home ownership, already out of reach of many, will only be the domain of the lucky few with family wealth. So if you think right now, people buying homes for their kids with down payments, people in the boomer generation helping their children by giving them down payments and saying, here, we're going to help you get your first house. We've heard Pierre talk about this time and time again. That shouldn't be the case. People should be able to get into their first home in their 20s.
Now, I will be honest. I think it depends when in the 20s. I will be honest there. Like, I feel like mid 20s, okay. Late 20s, okay. But early 20s, like, I had my first job, I was 18. And I was a late one because I had a friend that was 16 when he first started working. Let's be honest, I had a lot of minimum wage jobs. There's no way in hell in 2 years with a minimum wage, even like in the 80s or the 90s. There's no way in hell at 20 years old you end up purchasing your first house. I don't think so. Even if inflation wasn't that bad, I don't think that was a thing. I think that the people that were able to afford a house very young, like early 20s, I think that would be more plausible. But again, I think if you're mid 20s, that makes sense. Late 20s, early 30s, that's perfect. But don't expect an house at 20 years old. I'm sorry, but it's unrealistic.
It's also the taxes section too. It's
Yeah,
not just owning a house, it's also the ability to maintain it that gets people, because
yeah,
like
yeah.
to you can't, and forgive if you have an HOA, like there's standards. You can't just buy a house, you got to maintain that as well. Where,
That's true.
oh, you could buy the house, but can you pay the electric bill? What happens if something, like that occurs? Can you maintain that?
I have a condo, and with inflation, it got a lot worse. But it does cost me money yearly. I have a lot of tax linked to it, and I have um, general management of the building that have costs as well. So I spend money. If I didn't have the job I have right now, I would struggle as well. I have a decent job considering my low study and all. I make good money. I make a lot more money than I used to
Yeah.
when I was just 20 years old, and I'm lucky. But again, it costs money. Um,
Yeah. You're talking about having the ability to make it, as well as, and it's not like something to say about, is the earning power of a 20-year-old still good, because a lot of the people, like, like Trump, they worried about Trump was laying off these government employees in DC with their housing prices in the apartments that actually came down after a lot of them got fired. Those people get 80 to $100,000 a year to push pencils. An actual government like computer worker gets paid 100 plus easy, right?
And
That's
you
a
know what's
dream.
funny? You bring the pencil people. It's kind of hilarious because I heard it's been almost a full year because of the election. It's been almost a full year. People were not in parliament here in Canada, so we are just paying them to chill and do their election. We are paying for the election basically because we still pay as many tax and such. So these people, the bureaucracy itself cost so much money, and they're not even always there. It's nasty. It's crazy. When I don't show up at work, I'm not paid. But when you're a politician, you don't even need to show up at work all the time. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. But hey, it's the system here in Canada. So let's let's just play the rest. Housing is a weird topic. Owning a home, I think it's important. I think I like Pierre Poilievre plan, and he wants to make it affordable. It's amazing. Liberal, they have promised no plan, and I can bet, I can guess, they don't want you to own these homes. They want you to have a home, but to rent, not to purchase. Well, Pierre Poilievre, I know it's to own because that guy is a conservative, and conservatives do want to own things. Well, the liberals, they don't want to own anything because you don't need anything to be happy. You just need the idea, the ideology. Let's play this.
Now that generation's having to dip into their equity to help their children, equity they've accumulated and rightfully earned to help their children just get their foot in the door. They're saying this isn't even going to be possible. The only people who are going to own are people who inherit it from their families. Inequality between those who rent and those who own will become a key driver of social, economic, and political conflict, the report says. Wealth like home ownership will be largely integrational, with inheritance becoming the only reliable way to get ahead in life. Societal classes will also become increasingly isolated, both in real life and online.
And I
Algorithmic
will add
dating
more
apps filter by
societal
class.
classes. In India, I know a lot of Indian. I talk a lot with them, and I don't know how much of that is true. And even Arab people, they also told me about that. But in India, there's a lot of classes going on there, and it's really hard for you to move from class to classes. And this is why they are fleeing and leaving India, because it sucks to be there and to be in these different classes.
What you're talking about is a caste system. The
Yeah,
caste system is very much in place where, even so much so, if you lie about the caste you came from, it's despicable. Like, there was a lady, like, I've heard she was like a really good politician for them. Her worst crime was lying about her caste, what caste she came from, and they shamed her back down. And this is not happens not just to women, it happens to that. They still cling. It's like a really old idea where there's more upward mobility with. That's why if you look at a lot of CEOs of companies right now, they're largely Indian. A lot of Indians are CEOs. Like the head of YouTube right now is Indian. There's a bunch of them deleting. But there is a disparity with the ones who are stuck in India, in parts of that world. But bear in mind, society upward mobility globally is kind of screwed up. So,
and again, that utopia liberals want is exactly what's going on with the India thing, where you have classes where we have subhuman people, and we have okay human, we have normal human, we have higher human, and we have the rich and the kings and the queens. It's disgusting. It's, I said it earlier in the stream, it's things we would see 300 to 400 years ago. So the liberals, they want us to go back to the Stone Age. I exaggerate, but you get what I'm trying to say. So let's see what else that Utopia wants.
Gated metaverses, like real life, offer few opportunities to meet people from different backgrounds. Does this sound like a future anybody wants? It's
Carney
hard to
wants
move
it.
up in the world by making social connections that could lead to long-term romantic relationships, job opportunities, or business partnerships. Social relations no longer offer pathways to connections or opportunities to enable upward mobility. This sounds a lot to me like 15-minute cities. This sounds to me like population control. This sounds like battery farms. Just work for the government. Don't worry about having children. Don't worry about reproducing. Don't worry about having a home, feeling fulfilled. Just work, die, and let's move on to the next batch.
The slaves,
Other
but
issues include youthful aspirations of
with
social
money.
mobility replaced with expectations of immobility, the AI diminishing value of human labor. This will lead to near collapse of Canada's economy and trigger a mental health crisis, prompt professionals and immigrants to flee Canada for greener pastures.
I gotta say, we already have mental health crisis. So imagine you take away the bits of money that's left to people. They will go nuts. They need to hunt to survive like these liberals want. Forget that. The current mental health crisis is a joke compared to what we will have in 15 years. Mental health is very important. And when when you have classes like that, when you struggle to just afford food or have a roof, you won't go in that pyramid where you can take care of yourself, because you can't. You will be in constant stress, and when you're in constant stress, you cannot be healthier mentally. It's just not possible. So of course people will flee. Mental health will make people flee. Any thoughts on that?
so no, the thing about the mental health situation is, so to maintain our society, you need a good fertility rate. Under a liberal system, and I saw this in my generation, which was starting in the millennials era, there's like a belief you didn't need to have kids Then there was the idea they wanted to have kids because you had what? Like certain societies, it takes. So think of every generation gets halved to a degree where you would have 3 kids can go down to 2, but you have a replenishment in case something happens. It helps up. But like in the case of like Japan, right? Maintaining that society's been on the verge of collapse. And they said if it's not corrected by 2030, they're done. They're gone by the end of the century, Japanese as we know it. Because the fact they're down, their fertility rate is 0.84. There's no guarantee. Marriages over there are producing children, even. So there's part of mental health, there's part of reproduction. Generations aren't replacing themselves because they don't want to have kids, or they put it off until they think they can afford it. And then let's assume one of them die. Leading cause of death in even China and Japan is quite literally overworking yourself. Death from work. And it's just me now. Okay. So the idea, right, is I'm assuming that this is coming from, I'll go back over this to see. So this isn't just a Canadian issue. This is like the lower tier. Canada is the first to start descending, I think. This is just me. Like the going back to foraging, surviving, and that. So I don't know if you heard what I said, Multi, but
no, I was.
I said you need a fertility rate.
Oh, this I heard, yeah.
To actually, because this is liberal trends say you don't need kids or you wait. Because what if I told you the leading cause of death in Asian countries, even the South Koreans are starting to see this, right? Death from working yourself to death, and they're not having kids.
Yeah. And I will add more to this as someone that experienced a lot of loneliness. Like, for 5 years, I was single. And now it's been a few months I'm with my current girlfriend, and it's going amazing. And I had bedroom fun in the past a lot with 4 of the 5 partners I used to have. But now with my current partner, it's not only it's amazing, but I feel something I don't remember feeling in the past. I feel like I have a purpose and I'm so good. I have these dopamine rushes and my sleep is actually far better. And all of that, it's because I got her in my life now. And it's just, I'm living a dream. And I realize, wow, why did I waited 5 years? Well, I know why, but like I realized the value of a relationship by being into one. And I bring this up because I feel like the more divided people are, the more they forget about how it feels to be with someone. And it feels great when you have a good relationship. And I do think I have an amazing relationship. And because of that, my health in general is far better. My moral, everything is just better. I see life with these pink colored glasses, and I'm not as cynic as I used to be. And I was already kind of good in my own skin for quite some time now, for at least 2 years, 3 years actually. But I'm even better in my skin now that I have someone in my life. And because of that, I feel like I need to fight with a passion when I see what's going on with politics here. And if I didn't add that girlfriend, I think I would just give up. So I will thank her. I will thank the relationship I got because it gives me power and strength I didn't have before.
See, mental health is good for societal order. Now, this is where there's the I. It's not as much having a serf style class, which screws everything up. It's kind of like it's not as much the quote unquote incel issue supposedly that the UK was thinking with the adolescence thing. It comes along the lines of an unrested society that is not entertained has a tendency to be very unhappy unless they have no purpose. So not having upward so things affecting upward mobility such as happiness or mental health will change over time. And it's not about relationships, it's about being happy. Some are happy having kids. But as I said, part of it is a society able to maintain itself, but it's also part of a society not being fully deconstructed like you're seeing in certain sectors. Like with liberalism and progressives, they dismantle everything. What got them in trouble is when they started dismantling gaming. That was like an entertainment. That was the last vestiges. Even the Romans understood to keep the restless masses happy and the workers happy, give them gladiatorial games. Think about it that way.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And now to close off that tangent, mental health is worse than before, and it will be worse tomorrow if we head toward what the liberal utopia looks like. So let's just play the rest.
And more greener grassroots approaches to housing and food, including families foraging and hunting wildlife for food, and wholesale rejection of government or big business being able to meet everyday needs. And don't take my word for it. It's on the Government of Canada website. The government produced this. This is our government. It's horrible.
This is Carney and
Now,
his
if I go over to
people.
Twitter, we have Pierre Poilievre. I'm going to share his post. I should have had it up previously. But there was a journalist, Joe Warmington, who asked Pierre Poilievre this great question about this yesterday. And wait till you see Pierre's response. This has to be the final nail in the coffin for Mark Carney. Anybody with a brainstem at this point who wants to follow this blindly is either too wrapped up in themselves to care about future generations because they're not going to be here, or they just don't care at all about Canadians, or they don't understand economics. It has to be one of the two, or one of the three. Joe Warmington tweeted out, "Here's my question to Pierre Poilievre today. I was heckled and berated."
That goes back to what I said earlier. It's just framed in a better way because obviously English is native language. Well, it's not the case for me, but I've said that many times in the past of that current stream.
For asking it by other media. It offers insight to me why they perhaps were not offered a seat on Pierre's bus. Make no mistake, no liberal media arm reporter will ever intimidate me from doing my job.
It's funny, it's the liberal that intimidate others to intimidate others so they don't speak out because they're afraid, because when others speak out that means there's opposition, and maybe the opposition is actually right and you know it, but you're in denial or you strongly believe in what you think and you don't want to accept someone else's version or truth or perspective. A lot of these liberals, they are close-minded. It's the truth. How many liberals blocked me from social media because I'm right-leaning? Too many. And yes, I go hard on anti-liberal content but we must spread it because it's not the media. It's not like Radio Canada or other media that are paid and sell out to the government that will speak out. They are there to support the establishment. So we need to speak out as people. As people, we speak out. And because I speak out, well, I'm aided for my view. It's not normal. I don't hate any of the people that block me or remove me from their social media. I actually care a lot about them, and I'm sad about them because they are in a dark place for rejecting someone else's perspective. Any thoughts on that, the Lord?
So the concept you're talking about is not a new one. There is, as I said, the God, you can tell it's almost 2 a.m. But the cycle of not cycle of tolerance. See, there's a philosophy. It's about the philosophy of intolerance, where the intolerant or people fighting against it become fighting what they hate. The intolerance, because what happens with a lot of liberals, it does happen to a degree in conservative leaning people, is they become what they hate. The cycle of intolerance is like an Ouroboros. It eventually circles back around. And what's happening to a lot of progressives and far lefties is they're so hate consumed. They can no longer talk to the other side. Conservatives can still talk, for the most part, to the other side. If I told you how many people in Republican circles now in the U.S. just want to throw the far lefties out to die in the snow, let them be consumed, because for two reasons. They either A, don't want to talk to them and they can't be redeemed, or B, they just don't want to have that conversation.
That's true. And now we can play because I think we drove home the point I was trying to make.
Isn't this disgusting? The liberal media, because the paid shield prostitutes are all worried about what this means. Should people get a brainstem and say, I can't vote for Mark Carney. I can't walk blindly into this dystopian future. 15 years from now? It's not like we're talking 100 years. 15 years. Anybody watching this channel with children, this is their future as adults. This is what you're leaving them. Anybody with grandchildren, this is what you're leaving your grandchildren. My daughter is currently 10 years old. She'll be 25 when this comes to fruition. I'm sorry, I'm messing up so many words today because this just boggles my mind. But the liberal shill prostitutes are upset by this because they say, well, Pierre's going to defund us if he gets in. We have to silence all of this because our jobs are more important. You're being sold out by government media from getting the news you need so that they can keep their jobs.
It's exactly that, and it's sad, and people are selfish, and they are encouraged to be so because that's what we told them. It's about you. It's about yourself. Don't look elsewhere. Focus on you. Focus on this. Focus on that.
Isn't that pathetic? Isn't that just sad? Let's get to Pierre. Because look at his face. Pierre knows the question that's coming.
Yes,
and look at his face. Look at the disdain on his face. This is how you know you're voting for the right person if you're backing Pierre in this election. He can't stand what is being put towards him. I won't play the whole clip, but you'll get a painted picture because it's over 4.5 minutes. The video's already long. But here's Ryan Gerritsen, again, another amazing Twitter account. Every time I share his stuff, I keep telling people, go follow Ryan Gerritsen. Fantastic content. Thank you to George Warmington for bringing up this very important and disheartening report to Pierre. Oh, so Ryan isn't berating him like the liberal media. Why isn't this federal report being shared everywhere? Just listen to this. Let's take a listen.
Just before that, you mentioned about this report out of the Privy Council.
Yeah.
Now, as a crime
He looks down because he's like, yeah, I know about it. I tried to not go into it, but we are in it. That's what's going on. It's sad when you have kids and you care about your kids. There's no way in hell you want that utopia where you don't own anything and you need to hunt because you don't have the money to afford food. It's depressing. You cannot move out of your class. You're born in something, you're stuck there. That's the utopia, and this is why he's sad about it, because he has kids. He doesn't want his kids to live through that BS.
reporter, if you will, when I hear something like that, I cannot believe what I've heard. And it's such a stark contrast to what you talked about in your.
Do you see him shaking his head? Like he can't believe this. He can't believe that this is our government, that Privy Council puts this report out.
Platform. But I do want to go back, if you can address that, how that's going to help fix it. But that is the most negative thing in my 40 years in journalism that I've ever heard about Canada.
40 years. That's older than me. And that's around your age. That's tragic.
I don't see it too many places in the media, and I think it can't be glossed over. So I'd like to talk about that and how you're going to fix that if you win on next week.
I think you're absolutely right. I am shocked that, like, this is not an interest group or an opinion columnist or even a think tank that has put out this report. It is, and it is not even just a government department. It is the Prime Minister's personal department. Like, I think somebody has to ask Mark Carney, has he seen this report? His department wrote it.
I will answer this as a anti-Carney and pro-Poilievre. I think he knows it. Probably is the one that made it. And he's like, you know what? I need someone to write this stuff on my website. I wouldn't be surprised. Any thoughts on that, D-Lord?
Arguably saying he knows his internal polling looked bad for him. The way I have to read what the actual report really says in full, because if it was just a report on what is the economic outcome in 10 to 15 years, it looks pretty bleak because they say the earning potential. Economists and economic theory depends on the time and the data it has to work with. Because if they're seeing the trending, that's probably what determined it. Now, did Carney's department know about it 100%? Did Carney himself know about it? Probably not. Did an aide underneath him know about it? Probably better than Carney himself. Because if it was just a study put forth that got eventually published as an oopsie, you assume that a politician is constantly informed of what goes on around them. Unless you ask every day and you listen to your information or your aides, you don't know everything until the aide comes up and sees the report. Now, if this report made a big enough splash, got across enough sources, an aide will go, yeah, there was Dale who did this report, right? It would come to his attention. If it was some random bloke or an accountant way down the line forced to make a report that put it out and then it got out that way and they didn't think it was going to view negative, yeah, that's the problem. how much is Carney in touch with his own stuff? Even Trump himself, as a thing, doesn't always listen to his intelligence advisors, or at least in the beginning of his second term, was listening to his all the information being given to him. And arguably amongst liberals, like Kamala Harris as an example, she was notable for not fully taking the advice or listening to her advisors, or she told her advisors not to bring her negative news. So with Carney and how much his department actually knew, that's very hard to say. If it was just a report with an economic future, it looks bad if someone notices it on a website, but would they inform Carney is a different question. Is it something he would have to address? That was up to the person in the aide or Carney himself. Does that make sense, Multi?
Yes, it does, and I think you made very good points. I was very bleak and dark and harsh, but I like your thought process and your explanation. I like that you balance out my cynical view of things. It's amazing. I guess now we can play.
And what they are anticipating on the current trajectory is a total meltdown, a societal breakdown in Canada if we stay on the current track. Why this isn't blazing the front pages of every news outlet in the country right now is beyond me. It's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Like, it blows my mind. What they're actually saying is that I'm just going to read some of these. More people, this is for the future. It's not enough for Mr. Carney to say, oh, well, the last 10 years is in the past, forget about it. Stop bothering me about the past, he will say. This is the predicted future his department foresees for Canada. More people may struggle to afford rent, bills, or groceries. The resulting stress could worsen mental health challenges. This would increase demand.
I will reinforce what I said. Mental health is already bad. There's already a crisis lurking around, and people off themselves. Yet, it will get worse. I didn't think it was possible before seeing that video there yesterday, because I did happen to see that yesterday, and I was baffled. I was like, it can get worse than what we got right now? Yes, it can. Fight for your democracy. If you didn't vote conservative yet, go for it. Liberal won't solve anything.
On social services. In 2040, upward social mobility is almost unheard of in Canada. Hardly anyone believes that they can build a better life for themselves or their children through their own efforts. Many worry about sliding down the social
of the
order.
conservative
In 2040, owning a home is not a realistic goal for many. Inequality between those who rent and those who own has become a key driver of social, economic, and political conflict. In 2040, pursuing a post-secondary education is no longer considered a reliable path to social mobility. Fewer young people choose post-secondary education, and those who do see it less as a path to a successful career than a way to reinforce their membership in the, quote, elite. That's not my words. That's the government's words. The reports paints a terrifying picture of a spiral of economic depression and cost inflation. People may lose faith in the Canadian project, it says. It forecasts that this may trigger people to, quote, emigrate to jurisdictions where they perceive upward social mobility or other higher standards of living are easier to obtain. If young workers leave, it may become harder to pay for our social programs for the older people in the country. And then this last line, it staggers me. That because groceries are expected to become so expensive, according to Mr. Carney's top government department, people may start to hunt, fish, and forage on public lands and waterways.
And it's kind of hilarious, weird, and sad at the same time. I I haven't seen many animals walking around in my city. How will I hunt? Will I need a car? How will I pay the car to go outside of my town? To go hunt.
I
It's
mean, the thing
crazy.
about it is, when you talk largely about the predictions of Project 2030, like, I've heard about Project 2030. It's been by WEF and the UN, kicking around the UN for, they say, roughly around 2030. They just put that in stone along, like, around that, because they say a generation is about 10 to 15 years, give or take. And they look at the product and what a generation is producing. So you have this issue that government reports need to be prepared for government and societal collapse to rebuild it. Because in certain liberal ideologies, they anticipate there will be class warfare or like a helter skelter style situation in which you have sections that collapse. Now, it's like anything in a military. Like, if I say this, you would think I'm crazy. We in the in America have been basically going off military plans. They have been on and operated and updated since the 50s. For
I'm
the
not surprised. Uh,
Basically, they're updated because military periodically, when they hear stuff, updates them and then drags those plans out.
I'm not surprised. So
Yes.
I guess we can play now.
Like this is, it is just hard to believe when you read these words that this is about Canada. This is exactly why I'm in politics, to reverse this, to give people back the promise of this country. And we know what to do. We know how to get there. We have to unleash a plan for change, a plan that will cut people's taxes so their hard work pays off, that will remove bureaucracy so we can build over 2 million homes, that will lock up the violent criminals, that will unleash our resources to generate a $500 billion of extra economic growth that will fund schools and hospitals and opportunity for our people.
Let's
That's what's
back.
at stake.
So I know I showed the whole clip after I said I wasn't going to, but it was important to hear what Pierre had to say. This is, again, the most important election of our lifetime.
I agree with that, and I said it many times around. It's crazy. I was never that enthusiastic and worried about the future at the same time. I have enthusiasm if I'm glad if Poilievre win, that would be a great win. Hopefully he will implement what he suggests. And it's bleak and dark if these liberals get in power again. I think it's the end of democracy if they get back in power. So let's see what happens next with this video. I'm currently time stamping this because timestamps are important for the playback.
I will be completely honest, and because somebody asked me last night, I was in a discussion about politics last evening, and people were asking me, "Do you think Pierre's going to win?" Because people that I speak to who live in Ontario, while they are not voting for Mark Carney, are convinced Mark Carney's going to take this. In fact, Blanchette has come out. Yves Blanchette has come out to say he thinks Mark Carney's going to win. The fate of our country should not hang in the balance of a small pocket in Ontario. Unfortunately, it does. I am very scared about what 15 years from now could look like.
I say, well, not I. He says that mainly because there's a lot of seats there in Ontario, and if Conservatives win there, it's over. They won the election. But if they lose there, that might be very hard because, again, that's the place with the most seats.
I cannot, you cannot, we all cannot afford another 4-year term, let alone another 4-week term of this irresponsible globalist government that wants to treat Canada like a dictatorship, that wants to pillage the money from everyone's pockets, the profits from everyone's pockets, to line their own, pigs at a trough. I've said many times, I don't champion politicians like movie stars. I don't like to say that I'm on a team. But this election, it's too important not to. Yes, I will hold Pierre to account should he screw up when he becomes prime minister. Yes, I'm willing to call out the things that people don't like and question the government, keep the government in check. However, I will say this one time and one time only. This is why next week, on election day, you must get out and vote. You must cast your ballot. If you ever thought your vote mattered, this is the time to prove it. Get out and vote.
I agree with that, and I think that's the perfect moment to just cut that. And I will repeat what I said, what I think, what is basically the platform of the Conservative. We cannot afford a fourth Liberal term. You have seen that Utopia. You will freaking hunt because you cannot afford any food anymore. You will be depressed because you will realize, well, you cannot go higher in life. You don't have any purpose anymore. You're just a slave. This is what's going on. Now, I guess this is the outro, except if you'd like to share something else on the utopia of the Liberals and...
I'm good. I'm all this. No, I'm not black-pilled. The thing is, you need. But once you understand how governments work, because it's hard to explain to people, like, I recommend that people look up Yuri Blezhenov and what he said about the American liberals a long time ago. It's one of those things of, this was a man responsible for, which I have the magazine, I didn't realize he contributed on it, to, there's a whole story where he talks about how he tried to show the Western people. But he himself was responsible, or with the group of Russians that actually flipped the Indians to communism in the 70s. When these people who are master indoctrinators, how that society works, yeah. But when you start taking, because here's like some of the basics of it. To strip and indoctrinate a population in general, you need to get them off their main culture and off teaching history and get them onto gender studies or societal studies. This was in the 80s when he said this. Think about 20 years. You separate them from their nationalism into a more unitarian or global style position. This is nothing new. The thing is, you don't be black pilled. The thing is, you have to have a responsible voting populace to keep a government stable. But that's usually what they never tell you. You need to keep that stable, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Now, I guess this is the outro, and I will ask you, D-Lord, what do you have going on your end of the internet?
If you're going to watch this, I'll probably have a stream, even though this is late in the day, I will have a stream today for sure on Expedition 33. I just don't know what time. Because just as I speak, it just unlocked and just is unpacking as I speak. But I'll find out. I'll see if I'm up to it. I mean, I've had sleep. If it is what it is. But
thank you very much. Like, we spent almost the entire day together on discussion about politics. That was amazing. On my end of the internet, maybe another political stream like this one. There's a question mark. I don't know when. Probably maybe Thursday late night if you are still available. Um, maybe no, not morning. I don't know, but maybe late night Thursday. Actually, late night Thursday, and maybe late night Friday as well. So maybe two other streams like that because I think they are very important and they do very good
If
numbers
you
considering my channel.
I would say look forward. I would say look forward to the articles that drop because a lot of the stuff you're seeing, um, as I said, remember the days Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
Yeah,
Because if the government ever wants anything dumped and forgotten about, drop it over the weekend. Because
Friday.
Friday is because it's going to be forgotten, and unless it's very damaging, it's not going to be picked up by the Sunday news show. So,
Yeah. For sure, Fate. I will try my best. But yeah, again, next week more movie reviews. This is a constant on my channel. We got a weekly show where we talk about one or two movies each week. A lot of these movies are comic book related. Others are classic or more recent flick. Anyway, we are out. Thank you a lot, Fady. You were amazing. I think you were there for most of the stream. Thank you for your participation. And we already got the D-Lord leaving, but that was a great stream. And thank you very much. And yeah, thank you everyone that just sit there and listen to us talking about a bleak future. So we are out and see you on the next stream.